Melee changes are looking really good. Defensive changes looking really good. The fact that their solution to T17s didn't say anything about removing horrible mods, just that making difficulty lower by uh, less health and less damage by monsters, which is still a good change overall, especially when you are getting tankier with the defensive updates as well.
Good morning, Exiles. We are live from the Grinding Gear Games studios here in New Zealand. All three of us in person today for the first time ever for a very exciting and massive Q&A after some real whiplash from some huge announcements there. It just kept going. Like, you guys just kind of got in a room together and set up the whiteboard and put everything on there, huh?
End of the day, really, it's we have this much time, we have this many people who can do what we do, and we just keep going till the end. Like, it doesn't stop here. Like, we've still got one more week, right? Like, there are still changes that can be made, so we're going to keep making them. So, but yeah, it's huge. It is absolutely massive.
Yeah, Jonathan was saying to me the other day, I don't think it's that big. And I was like, mate, that was crazy. It just kept going.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, I kind of look at this and I'm like, okay, when I compare it to the amount of stuff that's being created for PoE 2, it seems small, but yeah, when you actually think about it, it's like, yeah, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, making a whole new game there, but we are only talking about Path of Exile 1 today, and you gave it plenty of space to shine, and we've got returning leagues, we've got a whole new league with a lot going on, and some very experimental content as well. And with all of that, you did tease us once again with the concept and potential of a boat league, and yet you sailed away and left us stranded on the dock once more. What gives?
It's very much not intentional. I suspect, and honestly, I honestly reckon if someone actually got a boat league, they wouldn't end up actually liking it. But we can only really prove that by testing it, and so maybe one day we'll get there. But until then, you're just going to there'll be boats, but you won't be on the boats. Maybe one day. We'll see.
All right. We'll have to keep dangling that just out of reach for us. So, does this feel like to you guys, and I've seen this theory floated around a lot, of a bit of a send-off league for Path of Exile 1, in a sense that we've got the Path of Exile 2 beta kind of just around the corner now?
I guess I don't really see it that way because, we intend to keep on making PoE 1 leagues. We're going to, it really is just, the standard lead cycle, it is hard as a studio making two things at the same time, for sure. But, that's something we just have to sort of get used to. And yeah, we certainly wouldn't want people to think, oh yeah, this is like the last PoE 1 league or something like that, right? It's definitely not the case. We're going to be continuing to make PoE 1 leagues, and, that like you should expect to see things of this size in the future as well.
So, Settlers of Kalgur, it adds gold, and I think we should touch on that and the whole currency exchange thing first. So it's obviously using gold for its features, its progression with the workers and upgrading buildings and things like that, but you're also experimenting with some core game features like respecs and a trading fee for the new currency exchange. Huge announcement there. So those that have been following Path of Exile 2 will be familiar with the concept of gold and why that's a thing that you might add to the game now after it's not had gold for so long. But could you explain what is the idea behind gold?
So really, I mean, gold is something that PoE 1 obviously never had. I think it's something that in retrospect, I think that didn't help the game.
Lower it for some reason.
The important thing with gold is that it's not used as a trading currency. Like, gold needs to be something that is only it's bound to the individual character, and that means what it effectively is a measure of how much actual play that you've done, right? Since you can't trade it between players, and that means that it's actually ends up being a perfect currency to be able to do something like gate the player-to-player trade with an automated system like that, because in order to be able to you can't just sit there flipping all day. You actually have to be able to go and play the game as well, and that sort of prevents the kind of crazy inflation that you can get with other automated, auction house type systems that you see in other action RPGs. Or at least that's the theory. But the thing is that we have to test this stuff, and this is the reason why we're really keen to do it as a league mechanic to start with, to sort of see, like, is it going to work? Is the economy going to go weird? What's going to happen? That way we can kind of dip our toe in, see what happens. Test this, because the thing with this trade stuff is you really cannot test it, like in the office, right? Like it is simply, we don't have thousands and thousands of people that you would need to be able to actually see how that goes. So on some level, we kind of need our community to see what happens with the economy to be able to test something like that. And that's just, one of the few areas where that's like that. What we're hoping is that everything just goes fine. It's just way better. We can then immediately put it in, the core game as soon as we've done with that, ideally without too many tweaks. And then that'll be good. But we really have to see by putting it in a league first.
The thing I really like about this gold idea is that it allows you to effectively be converting this idea of friction in the user experience of like physically trading into actual gameplay.
Right,
the stuff we like doing.
For sure. That really helps. And as I said, like this system, it'll be also really nice to be able to see how it works before we ship PoE2 as well. It's really nice to to be able to do that. And we may be able to go further than this. The intention is to go further, and so this is effectively our first the first part. We'll see how it goes. I don't know if you know.
There is also one thing about this, and just because it maybe wasn't clear, is that despite being in the league, gold is just dropping as items from killing everything in the game. You kill monsters, you play the game, you're getting gold. You don't actually need to engage with the league to use the gambling, use the respecking, or use the currency exchange. So despite being in the league, and the gold is only dropping in the league due to us being more experimental with it and seeing how it goes, like if you don't like the league's mechanics, it's not like those are gated behind that as well. I just wanted to clarify that, just in case anyone was thinking, I don't want to.
You can just invite Faustus into your hideout and then just use them for that, and and that can be the only thing you do if you want.
So all that currency exchange, the item gambling and stuff is all like fully accessible, even if you basically don't do any of the other stuff.
For sure.
Yeah, which means, of course, if it is successful, it can port into the core game very, very easily. You just turn gold drops on, put Faustus in. Done. I mean, there's a little bit more than that, but that's generally the summary of it. And it doesn't have to come with the whole kind of city building element and all of that comes alongside it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you see it being something that's likely to stick around then? And that's kind of the intention.
That is certainly our intention. It's just that we want to be able to still have an out if things go horribly wrong, or if we feel like we need to change some
don't
stuff.
blame any other
parts
of the league.
It's a nice little safety net at being part of the league for you then. Safety rip.
Probabilities are high, and I suspect also no one's going to let us remove it. Right?
Hopefully they don't blame the currency exchange if something else in the league is causing the economy to be bonkers. It's just these shipments are so good. This recombine combinator is so good, but we're gonna blame it on the currency exchange, and the currency exchange is why the economy is like this. So we're not gonna have it. Hopefully that's not the case.
Through the campaign, and you're looking for specific targeted gear upgrades, very, very useful for that. And it, as you get higher and higher level, I guess as you upgrade your tavern, I guess technically sort of, but also as you just get higher level, it upgrades the modifier tier rating, which was a term some people might not know, but it was used in Necropolis League, which effectively cuts off the bottom X tiers that can generate. So the items by endgame will be generating with a minimum tier higher than something, and thus they are pretty powerful items.
It's worth mentioning that there's quite a lot of changes in this league around the idea of how can we make rares more viable than uniques. Quite a lot of the balance things are actually around this idea, and that extends to things like adding more base types higher up and so on to make it so that there's that they can compete with uniques more. The higher tier life mods, all of this sort of stuff, and the gambling and the ability to get rares this way as well is once again another part of this. So we really want to try and make it so that and the reason why that's important is because if like Mark said in the video with the item quants problem as well, that was one of the other things that sort of meant that you had to be tied to specific uniques like for sure. And so yeah, we just wanted to remove more of the barriers that allow people to just be able to use rares, and then that opens up for more different build types. Like if less uniques become mandatory. That's, as I said, it's just another one of those things that kind of affects that.
So with that being an attractive expenditure of gold, how much do you want players to be able to trade currency freely between each other with this very fast and asynchronous currency exchange system? Like, obviously, gold is your ability to control how much of that's happening in terms of volume. How liquid do you want any currency orb drop to be?
So for currency in particular, we're fine with like a very high amount of liquidity. Later on, we've talked about how in PoE2 we're going to be doing asynchronous trade for items as well. For that, we need to have a bit less liquidity, and the reason why is because currency can sync itself, like there is its own currency sync. So effectively, that means that we don't have to like worry too much about fast trade there. Like the relative value should establish, and everything should be okay, and it shouldn't matter too much about that being highly liquid. That said, there is still a gold price to do it because we don't want people literally just sitting there just doing only that forever. But that this is something that we don't want to. It certainly should feel like if you're just playing regularly, that you can get all the currency you want from the trade market and you don't feel restricted by the gold price. Like, it's not intended to be something that a normal player would run into, assuming that they're just doing normal things with currency.
Of course, it is still meant to have high friction early game.
Because you don't want
to demean the leveling experience and the new player experience where they think the right answer is to go and just trade all of the stuff away. You want it to be that you're more finding items there and getting things organically, and only later in the game does it become.
So the gold prices late in the game are like not a roadblock at all. The gold prices early in the game are a roadblock. So that's kind of preventing that early game kind of issue.
Yeah, because you want an ALC when you're leveling your first character. You do feel like an ALC.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to be like,
you don't
this
want
should
to
be chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. But that honestly sounds like a relief that you're not worried about that sort of thing too much, because that that kind of incentive to hoard currency and not spend it all while leveling is always a bit of a bummer.
Right.
This feels like a bit of a momentous occasion, the the currency exchange. This because you've had this whole system of like the currency that syncs itself and stuff for so long, and now finally blending that with gold and this system. Huge.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's also just a mental block as well, right? Because it's like, how can you add gold to PoE? It's like, it's just one of those. It's one of those things. So
this was one of the key components that was part of like designing the league. It was largely like how we started from that point. Because again, when you ask most people in the office, most players in the office and outside the office, what is the like number one problem with Path of Exile? And what experience gives them the most negative reaction?
For sure,
it's often trade.
Yep.
And especially, and I can't remember if it was last league or the league before, and I was trying to buy. What was I trying to buy on the currency? It was like one of the catalysts. I was like, okay, I just need a catalyst up my rings and Emmy.
Oh, man.
And, you get 100 people on the trade website. Yep. I just went spam. I got 100 people. And guess how many replied? Zero. Zero people replied to me. And I know you're meant to scroll down because all the top people are just bad actors. And then it's like, okay, I actually got to a point where I was like, okay, genuinely no one replied. And then like so as I say on Discord, I was like, yo, I need some help buying these things. Can everyone just start messaging everyone trying to get these catalysts for me, please? And so yes, it is actually was hopefully to be no longer soon the most frustrating experience you can have as a player at endgame.
It was something else.
And yes, so when we're designing the league, we're like, okay, if this is the number one problem, how are we not taking some sort of stride to solve it? And so that's kind of where it almost acted as the basis of how can we build something around that, because then it's gold, and then it's like, what can you do with gold? And then we just extrapolated from there into all kinds of things. So yeah, I like that a lot of.
So I like this idea of gold not becoming the new currency, where all these orbs and stuff are no longer your currency for trading and stuff. Gold facilitates the trade. It's not the currency for the trade. Gold facilitates the stuff in this league. It's the currency. Well, it's the currency for stuff in this league. But you get gold naturally killing things, and you saw it. We all saw it. It was like it looked like doing maps, it was like 400 something every few kills or something. Like they killed a pack and there was like a total of like 1,600 things on hold on the ground. It the Act 10, the 10 way, and then there was like a few thousand on the ground. Like, yeah. So gold not being absolutely replacing your currency for everything, but it's just the currency for the league, and to facilitate these, a much better trade-off than what I thought they were going to do with gold in like PoE 2 and stuff. But we'll see with PoE 2, but PoE 1, it looks good.
Incubators can't be because they have a level, things like that. They can't because they cannot guaranteed stack on a single thing. And it's not like you don't want to have a tab of incubators where it's got every incubator level 1, every incubator level 2, every incubator level 3, in this giant mega eternal list. So things like that you'll be trading using the existing way, and all stackables you'll trade hopefully using the new way.
All right. But
div cards?
Yes, div cards are in there.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Anything that is stackable, that
There's just so many of them, that's all.
yeah, anything that's stackable and has no other variable. Yep.
Wow. And you were telling me that like it will list like the 13 most common trade pairs for each item, and
yeah, so this is the thing, because with this trade system, you can technically trade any item for any other item, because that's how PoE works. So we have to have some kind of way to basically tell players, okay, so here's the actual thing that like people are trading this with. So effectively, unless you're the first person ever to trade something, then it's going to say like, here's the most popular several things that people trade for the SOAR, trade for the SIN. It also shows you like the market price, obviously, for what's been going on, as well as okay, so we're getting into stock market terms here. But the first five price levels in the order book. So that's to say you can see like what the how many things are available at a few different price levels, and that will allow you to do your trade. So I suppose some people will be learning more about the stock market pretty soon. I guess we'll have
some people are going to love that.
Yeah, for sure. But one thing just to make sure people understand is like this is still player to player trade. Like you don't know who you're trading with, and like it will be instant if there's like liquidity in the market. But it is coming from someone else's actual stash.
Yeah, it's a physical trade still.
Yeah. So just that's worth being, because some people when they see the video, they're okay, it's just like you're trading with the system somehow, or there's some kind of like market thing where the system like determines a price or something. No, it's not that. You're actually buying off someone else. So any trade you do where you've got like I'm buying this, I'm selling this, someone else has entered a trade on the other end of I'm selling this, I'm buying that. And
the prices are all set by players. It's not you guys setting that stuff.
Exactly.
There's a few other things I'll just mention as well that are adjacent or that got implemented as a result. So like when you're adding them, it will pull from your stashes. It won't. You don't have to move everything to your inventory first and then do it. So you can, because if people might be wondering, okay, if I want to sell or trade away 5,000 chaos or some number of chaos that won't fit in their inventory, as long as it isn't their stash, you can do it. You can do up to 65,000 of a given currency in a single exchange. If you have that much. What else? There are shortcut binds for moving all of them to your inventory, so you don't have to like control click spam 1,000 times. It is, I believe, control right click will move all of them to your inventory. And also as a bonus, we have implemented that to and from the stash with all stackables as well. So you can control right click on a thing in your inventory to move all of that type into your stash. and vice versa.
My 35-year-old hands are falling apart. Thank you.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. Best change. Very good. So if this is successful, do you see it being something you expand to being able to do other things that aren't homogenous, so maps and gear and things like that?
Well, that's certainly the plan for PoE 2, and it would be nice to be able to do that in PoE 1 as well. We just have to work out how it can work exactly. So, I believe that we will get there, and that's certainly our intention. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's the intention. Like this part, I think though is like solving quite a large amount of the problem, because I think this is the currency is what you're doing all the time. You know, you need that to be easy. So like we figured that you know, we needed to get this part out there first.
Yeah, historic for the first time ever. That's been the we want to do this unless something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Amazing. Perfect. All right, well, we'll leave the currency exchange there. Thanks for the extra insight on that. Did you have to resist the temptation to go like full candle graphs and all that stuff?
I'm sure at some point.
To.
I'm sure at some point the you know the this will start to happen. We'll have like you know community like websites of like all the technical
plugins.
Indicators and like all that sort of stuff.
Mad Money YouTube channel. Yeah.
It is worth noting also on the currency exchange, I will be posting a video on Monday just for anyone who's unclear, or Monday or Tuesday, New Zealand, for anyone who's unclear on how it works. It's a little bit of a like currency market for dummies kind of thing. It's just goes over the basics and hopefully, you know, it's room for either feedback on UX if they see anything that wants to change, or of course just better understanding of how to use it. It is very easy for someone to get very scared looking at it and go, I don't quite know what to do. But it is pretty straightforward. You just, you know, it can be easy to fare yourself out of buying or selling stuff because you may be like, I don't know what the best ratio is, and it provides all that stuff for you. It's pretty straightforward, but still. So hence putting out a video to try and help people out, you know, in terms of understanding when they're going into it, and we'll see how it goes.
Mate, I'm definitely signing up for your trading tips newsletter. Can't wait.
My trading tips currently is like spam everyone and get really angry. So hopefully it's no longer that afterwards.
That's all of our strategy currently.
Agreed.
Excellent. So returning to Settlers of Kalgur, how did this very cozy concept for the Settlers come about of this town building thing?
Well, I know what you pitched me on first was Pal World League. That was the first pitch I got.
I remember your initial response, I think, was, "What? Hold on, that could mean many things. Does that mean we have guns?" And I was like, "Well,
catch
maybe."
Like Pokemon things,
you know.
So it kind of like it moved around a little bit from the initial pitch. I know, like, 'cause I mean, the first pitch was definitely too complicated with all sorts of like, it had like way more stages of different products and all sorts of stuff going on. Like it was pretty crazy, and so it kind of got put into a more sort of like PoE applicable like way. But that was the initial one at least. But I don't know if you've got a
it was coming from again the philosophy of wanting to solve problems. So I wrote down all the problems. And I was like, how can we solve all these problems? And it was like, well, if you had an NPC for each, and then it's like an NPC, well, that would mean a town for each. And then you want to make some game mechanic out of it, so you have some level of automation and stuff like that. And yes, there was a very, very, very long list at the start. And we ended up just refining it down to like, here are the actual important things that we can do and want to do. But yeah, and then obviously how the rest of it came about, the coziness and using Kalgur and all of that stuff, ultimately just comes from the fact that it's like, well, one thing that takes a long time in development, like a very, very long time, is art, right? It takes a long time. You got your concept, you got research, you got, you know, all the way through to the actual modeling and everything. It is a long process. So all of a sudden when you can be like, well, we've got all this art from this other game here.
Andy?
Yeah. So we actually thought it would be pretty cool, basically, because in Act 4 and PoE 2, we've got this whole thing of like the Kalgur making a settlement on Rayclast. We thought it would be just cool to sort of tell that story of how that happened here, and we've got some of the stuff like we're like, it would be quite nice to do that. That's kind of ended up how that being. But the theme that we got there came after the initial concept of we want to make some kind of settlement town thing, and we're like, okay, what can we do with that? And then we realized, hey, like we've already got this sort of storyline we've got going on here in PoE 2, might as well connect it up and kind of have like an interesting thing there.
It definitely feels like increasing the scope of the world a little bit, because this is a distant civilization 1,500 kilometers away. I saw on the map, and those are people who have not been involved in the storyline of PoE 1. So this is a new expansion there, world-wise.
I mean, they always sort of technically existed. Like there was lore written for that when we did the previous expansion with them, Expedition. But like in PoE 2 we kind of expanded on that because we had that location and everything, and so we that just meant that we've got the stuff, and I think it adds a little bit to the flavor to have to do that sort of stuff.
But yeah, it is very, very rare for us to go to talk about or go outside of Rayclast ever.
Yeah, there's presumably a whole world out there, but we've not really heard too much about it, right?
Well, it's not just like here's a planet of water with this like tiny little island, right? Like
The Star Wars planets.
So
all just one thing.
What we're saying is boat league is possible. It's not like
There's
it's just
places the
land
boats to
everywhere.
go, confirmed,
Damn, that
right?
was a good. I could have used that as an excuse for no boat league, was to have it. There's
nowhere
aside
for
from
the
this little
boats
bit
to
of
go,
water,
right?
there's just land.
Yeah.
The rest of it, yeah.
Yeah, you've already dropped the ball on that one. There's a few boats already.
Damn it, there's lots of water.
All right.
Yeah.
So this idea of this is very much like a meta progression league, right? Like, and that's not a new concept. The idea of like a league having its own sort of progression outside of your personal character progression, but this is definitely the main flavor here. It feels. Is this something you specifically wanted to give players, like a greater context for their things that they're doing? So they're doing their Atlas, but they're getting golden resources and progressing this whole other thing.
I mean, for sure, but I will mention that, like, I guess it wasn't dwelled on a lot in the video, but like the resource gathering thing, like those encounters are encounters that you're going to be encountering through the world, and they have their own mechanics and stuff, which obviously Mark can talk more about. So like that is definitely like content there as well. It's just that like it's kind of not as easy to show. Like we kind of needed to show about all this sort of town stuff, but yeah, those encounters will hopefully be very enjoyable as well, and that's kind of like. I suppose you could call that the meat and potatoes in some sense of the league, because that's what you'll be doing. Every area you're going to find these things and have to do those encounters. So.
Yeah. So what's that content like in maps then?
Yeah. So you got one in every area. Well, aside from something like Tidal Island and some of that stuff, you got one in every area minimum. So it's 1 to 2, and there are 5 different outcomes. Kind of 6, but we'll go over the 5. So you can find different minerals. So the first is crimson iron. Crimson iron is like iron that's overrun with like corruption. So you have these 3, 2 to 5, as it goes up as you go through the game, of these kind of growth spawners, and they're spawning demons or monsters. And then as you kill each growth, the other growths heal, like surge, spawn more monsters, and they accelerate. So they get slightly harder over time. So it's just a full monster encounter. Upon completing it, you get the ore. You've got orichalcum, which is like guarded by these also demons, or demons were worshipping it. And you notice it had like a shrine icon. So after you kill all the demons, you get the shrine buff, which is, without immediately it sounding underwhelming, the old you had the old like shock, where you got the shock nova and firestorm shrines, except like done actual damage. So like all of a sudden you've got meteors and lightning storms raining down around you, and they are actually designed to kind of destroy monsters. So you get just this spike of power where you can kind of just run through and let them just obliterate everything. The third is petrified amber, which is looks like a little kind of like a tree thing, and clicking it, and all of a sudden heaps of blight-esque monsters kind of come out of the ground and try and attack it. And it's almost like the old Aurion missions from way back, where you just have to protect this tree from the blighted monsters. It's not very difficult. Like, none of these are pitched to be very, very difficult, but they are going up in difficulty in the order that I am explaining them. The fourth is bismuth, which I suspect will be people's favorite. The way this works is it's guarded by magic and rare monsters. I think 3 packs. I think 1 is rare. Well, maybe early game not rare, but late game it's like 1 is rare, 2 are magic. And they have an extra elemental modifier on them. Like the rare and magic mods, they just got an extra one that's elemental aligned. And when you obviously kill them, there's some free 3 packs of monsters. No one's going to complain about that. You click the bismuth, it releases the elements into the rest of the area, which will apply elemental modifiers to all magic and rare packs in the area. League monsters have a lower chance of getting them, so it's not too out of control. And that does come with the difficulty, but it also comes with the increased item quantity and rarity that
It's a bit Wildwood,
the mods come with.
isn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. Obviously, it doesn't spawn frequently enough, so I don't expect people to do the whole, run around the whole area killing nothing before clicking it.
Yeah, nice.
You'd be wasting all of your time. However, of course, I can imagine it is the Magic Finder's dream, even though magic finding is nerfed, but whatever, that's a different thing. It is the current, whatever is to be Magic Finder's dream.
Magic Find's buff because it's better now, because you don't have to wear crappy gear.
Well, sure. Well, yeah, sure. Whatever state it's in, or however you feel about it, it is the dream for that person, because obviously you can find I believe you can find 2 of them in an area, and all of a sudden you're doubling up on that. I will obviously double check that, but that was definitely the intention. And then, you're getting like these kind of elemental tornadoes spawn throughout the level. Obviously, they don't spawn when all the monsters are dead, so you're not just like looting and getting killed by a random tornado. And
Nice.
then the fifth encounter is Verisium, which is the thing that the Kalgurans love so much. And that very much is... it's like the encounter from Crucible, where it's just like, interact with this rock and it like builds up the amount of Verisium and like spawns all the monsters around it, and then you fight them and kill them, and you get the Verisium at the end, and the monsters, you can see them kind of merging and upgrading over time. And so it's a little bit of a pick your own difficulty. Obviously, it doesn't have the whole, I talk about Crucible, it doesn't have the whole weapon tree ruckus going on and having to put an item in there and all that. It's just
Bring
here's
it
your
back.
encounter. And then, of course, there is one boss as well, so occasionally you find a kind of hollow in the ground.
Yep. One boss.
Yep.
Okay.
It's in-game, very much in-game. Quite difficult, and he is guarding a lot of Verisium, and also, again, can drop a unique, and I'm pretty sure all those bosses drop a pretty substantial amount of gold as well.
So you've kind of got like 5 micro league mechanics kind of just there
Yeah.
also, like on top of all that stuff. But as I said, it wasn't really covered like that extensively in the video. So I
Yeah,
guess that was
that's-
something that people, like that's your kind of like main combat stuff that you're kind of doing, that's in area. In the league.
And you've got the bosses like attacking your town and
Yep,
boats
there's a couple
and
other things
stuff
like
too.
that. So yeah, there's kind of other things. So there's actually a lot going on with that. That more so than what was kind of explained.
But all that to say, there's a lot of words to say that it seems like a classic fight monster in circle.
For sure.
Fight
for
monster
sure.
in circle.
Yeah, it's one,
People love
two, it's 2, 3, 5. So yeah, 4 encounters fight monsters in circle, and 1 is fight monsters in whole area.
Right.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Those are
classics.
everybody's favorite.
Yeah.
So even if you're not that into the meta progression side of things, it's still a fight monster in circle that you get
Yes,
against.
yes, of course.
Good.
Sure.
It all comes back to that.
It is expected, and again, you can. There's no real harm in like just doing that for as long as you want, accumulating as much gold as you want, and then if you want to engage with the town later or something, that's always something you can do. End of the day, the gold is going to be your primary restriction, so being able to just farm for ages and get a whole bunch of gold isn't going to and while not necessarily engaging with the town, is not going to set you back that far.
Yes, this is very much a take it at your own leisure.
100%, 100%,
And
yes.
That touches on the next question, and the one that when I watched it, I was like, this is the thing people might be most concerned about, is the somewhat controversial
Real
area
time.
of game design,
Real
timers,
time.
right?
Yeah,
So
sure.
we worried that this would give people ick because they just have that around
Yep,
timers.
I can see what you mean, and like that was honestly when I was talking to Mark about like what's the thing that's going to be the controversial thing about the league. That was certainly up there. One thing that we're wanting to make sure that's really clear though is that you can stack a lot of work like on like in your town that can be done in a queue without you having to come back. So it's not like you have to come back every freaking hour to like check on anything, right? Like you
That was
can
my concern,
you can queue days of work and like if you're doing like your map runners, for example, like you've got your big queue there that you can do, and then like you can just come back and then they've run all the maps, you get all the loot from all of them.
So you can just log in when you normally log in.
It
You're not,
also
like, getting
doesn't
up in the
mean
middle
it's
of the
so long. Like there's these sweet spots in time that we've really aimed for, right? Anything too short, highly annoying.
Yeah, check it all the
and
time.
then anything too long feels like a mobile game,
Yep.
right? So we have this kind of sweet spots for a lot of them where it's like for example, you have your queue of maps, but I think. I will note, like, I'm going to say some times, but it is highly variable, and you have the agency based on how much gold you have, the skilled workers you have. You can get these things pretty damn quick. You can, but you can also have them take a bit longer, and it's not necessarily the right or wrong answer to go either way. So if you want faster turnaround on your rewards, you do have some agency on that. It'll just cost more gold to do so. And if you want to have like a slower turnaround, and focus your gold somewhere else, that is entirely up to you if you want to do that. So it's got a lot of agency. However, we have been experimenting with numbers like a lot. It has been discussed constantly. And for example, with the shipping, you had the port of Kalgur. That's the one that has the longest distance, or the 1,500 kilometers. That does take the longest. And I currently believe it's towards even 10 hours. But there are ones that are going to take less than 1 hour. And now there are advantages, like a longer shipment will yield better rewards and have higher risk and different rewards. Each port has different unique rewards, and a closer one, but it's not like such a differential that you're always going to do. Well, it's hard for me to predict exactly what players will think that is the best answer, but it shouldn't be the case that you're always doing the thing that takes you feel like you have to do the thing that takes like 10 hours. So there's lots of quick things, lots of long things, and it's kind of up to you how you want to engage with that. And I think that's honestly what mostly differentiates a lot of this, aside with the fact it's also gated by gold, which requires you to actually play the game. It's not like it's just some AFK town, at the end of the day, you have to be playing in order to actually achieve this, killing monsters, looting loot. So there's heaps of stuff there, but we have aimed for that exact sweet spot such that if you are playing, it's not highly annoying and also not like I never get my rewards. Like it's going to be pretty bad if you're like, I'm level, let's say you're in Act 1 and you unlock your shipping and you send your shipping and you're like, okay, I'm not going to get that back till I'm level 80.
The ritual problem.
That's just terrible, right? So yes, there are very quick turnarounds as well. For things like that, and then there are longer turnarounds when you're willing to spend that time to do so. And noting there are 3 ships, you could send one to a far port and then one to a close port, so you can get some ships turning around with high frequency and another turning around with a longer frequency. And the same with the mapping. It's entirely based on the difficulty of the maps, and again how skilled your runners are. So if you want to have higher turnarounds as well, you can put in either easier maps, lower tier maps, or you can put in more difficult maps. Now, I did note in the live stream, the timer on the mining was before we had done any iteration, so I'm pretty sure it had some real absurd amount of time to mine that ore. That was just a straight mistake. Does not take that long. It is much, much, much quicker.
It's also worth mentioning with the stuff is that, like as I was saying with the queues, like, okay, you can just put as many, like when you find resources and there's that sort of mining queue, it's not like you have to like manually reassign your things every time. Like they just move on to the next task.
Yeah.
So effectively what that means is that, you're not having to come back every, like, and refresh them. You just play, and then the only stuff you have to come back, anything where you'd have to come back and reset them, like for example with the mapping, the queue is long enough that you can just like jam a bunch of stuff in there. And then like what I don't want is you to feel like you have to like wake up in the middle of the night and like freaking put more stuff in there and then come back. That's what I want to avoid. Like it should be that you're still coming back at the normal time that you would play, like that is our design intent. And so if that's not, like we need to make sure that we're balancing it correctly so that that's the case, that you don't feel pressured to like log in at some time you wouldn't normally do it.
Yeah, this sort of thing can be fun because it's like you get to come back to rewards and progress, and everybody loves progress and progression, right?
For sure.
We're addicts for that stuff. That's why we play this genre. But I was definitely concerned about that idea that would have to, I feel like if I didn't get on in half an hour after I was planning on logging off, I wouldn't be able to reallocate my workers.
Right.
But you don't have, it just does all.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
Well, we're not making a mobile game here. I know that's the
and you can't pay to skip
association.
any of these timers.
Of course not. And I'm not going to also at one point. I know. Look, these things are always going to be divisive. They're not necessarily going to be globally loved. And part of it is just you're going to have to try it to understand.
Mm-hmm.
That the concept of a timer is scary to start with. But I'm also on the other hand not going to sit here about complaining about the cold currency thing and then also implement something that on the other hand I'm going to have equal levels of frustration with myself as a player. Surprisingly, but you
want to play this after all, don't you?
100. Of course I want to play it. I'm never going to make a game I don't want to play. So yeah, my hope is, but of course that assumes we get it right. The good thing is we're very, very fast to react to this stuff. So if the timers are tilted one way or another, we have so many levers we can adjust to rebalance. It is, of course, we get our internal feedback, we get our alpha feedback on the times, but that's still a very small subset compared to everyone.
I think a lot of people, hopefully they got it timed right, but hopefully a lot of people will be, depending on their game timing, it's like you go in at the start of your gaming session, you get your things that you got from overnight or whatever the last time was you played, and then at the end you have things queued up, you grab it, and then you put more things queued up. Maybe if you're say you don't work that day, you play all day, you'll have a couple, maybe one more or two more times where you return for queuing things up in the middle. But yeah, hopefully it feels good in your game session where it's not just, go in at the start and then do not interact with it at all after your start, until the end. Hopefully there is, outside of upgrading things and spending that, there's more, you are finishing some stuff in the middle of your gameplay. Hopefully that's the case.
If you can get good enough people and run slightly easier content, and all of a sudden there's no risk of your Atlas runners failing or anything like that.
Yeah. Speaking of risk, so how does this scale with like map tiers and map effect and stuff like that? So as you move up through maps, do you get more resources, more gold? Does it scale with like map quantity? So your mods?
Yep. Gold scales with everything that drops would scale with. In party, I get my gold, you get your gold. We cannot share gold. Obviously, there's no point in having it. If you can't trade it, then all of a sudden, items do not sell for gold, so it's not like you can trade items to bypass that. But everything, item map quantity scales gold. Yep, all the same. It's auto pickup, obviously. With obviously the new enhanced item pickup radius, and the amount of ore also should scale with quantity. Yes, obviously, much like sulfite, I guess, from Delve. That's probably one of the closest comparisons in terms of like giving you a resource.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it seemed like mostly gold was used to upgrade the buildings and things like that in your town, and that sort of progress is mostly through that. So the resources are all for this shipping, to get this risk-reward system, to get currency and gear and stuff like that. And the multiple pages of currency thing, that looked a bit crazy. Is that for real? Like, how much work is getting 3 pages of Chaos Orbs and Divines and stuff?
Well, that's that agency I'm talking about as well, where a long trip should yield a lot of loot. Now, we have made some changes since then where what we're doing is, instead of, because we were scaling rewards on quite a quantitative axis, and we've moved a lot of that into more qualitative, so that like instead of getting so much more currency linearly, you're getting better currency instead of more, just so it's less of that.
Alts roll up into chaos and whatnot.
Yeah, if you save up, like you can just be like, I'm just going to play, get all the gold and acquire as many resources as I can and send a shipment that's like maxed out in value, and then put the best possible ship workers on there, because you don't want to lose that shipment, I'll tell you that, and send it to the farthest thing. Like, you'll get back a ton of loot, but of course you have to. You're now getting 1 week of loot all in one go. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, okay.
You will get an absolute ton, which some people will find ultra satisfying.
Yeah.
But yes, we are trying to not. Obviously, it shouldn't be that you're just getting 50 pages of items, but you'll get some amount, and ideally the quality of the items get better as you send more, as opposed to just the quantity. Yeah.
I saw a question in chat as well. The wages, like, how does that work with when's that getting paid? Like, do you get overdrafted account fees? Like, what are we dealing with here?
So you have to take your gold. So you've got your personal gold, and then there's a treasury, and you want to put the gold in the treasury, and the wages only take from the treasury. And the reason for that is so that you're not like just randomly losing your gold. That you're like, okay, I'm going to get to 60,000 so I can buy these items. And all of a sudden it's just like draining it, and you like can't figure out. So your wages are paid from the treasury. You can do this via Johan or via the village map. There's just you hit add, drag, set an amount, hit add, it goes there. And yeah, they are just continuously drained from that. So it's not like it doesn't come in chunks. It's like continuously going.
And do they unionize if you don't put enough money in there, or?
Not in Ray class to know.
No worker protection in Ray class.
All of a sudden you might find you're collaborating with those pirates and with those bandits, and like you're arranging them to come in and kidnap people more often, and you had that abandon option we saw because those workers were
nice.
No, they don't. It's all very much a that we're all achieving the same goal, I guess, on the same team, but they just want their money. That's fine.
Yes, the children yearn for the mines. So I cracked up when I saw the map running teams auto simulating map thing.
Yeah.
So do they actually simulate running the map? Do they like actually run the map for you and get the things out of it you would get out of it?
We've tried very hard to make it feel like the case. However, of course, like, you don't simulate actually every single monster dying. It's too much expensive, right?
Extrapolated
but
simulation.
you effectively take here's what you'd have, and then you have, I mean, here's the question: do you trust the workers to pick up the right items? Because like. What if like what if it's like you like get back your items and you're like, damn it, I know you left a mage blood on the ground. I just know you did. But yeah, anyway, you're not going to think about that, obviously. I mean, you can if you want, but yes, you do get it back. So if you send them to I can't remember which maps. We've shuffled all the div cards around, so I'm not sure which maps drop what.
Now
But
we
whatever,
can too.
whatever one drops mage blood, if you put that base type in, you the mage blood card, you will get that card out. That is the way to get that. Of course, generally people like running that themselves. So,
and you're telling me that like if it's a Hydra map, they'll bring a Hydra fragment back for you.
Yep, if you put in a Hydra map and they clear it successfully, it's worth noting they have a percentage amount of clear. And you can get that as high as you possibly can, but sometimes they get through like 50% of it and die because you put the map in as too hard.
Yeah,
You'll get 50%
are
of
they
the
burning
items.
6 portals halfway through a Hydra map?
Yeah. Some of the, if you're not sending elite people, they're kind of bad.
There's different quality of map runners, just as there is in Path of Exile players.
I mean, if you're sending your miners into the mapping, they don't know what to do. They're just like, I've tried mining the monsters and I failed
on the first pack.
Yeah, but yeah, they'll bring that back. You chuck in a map with 5 delirium orbs, they'll probably all die. But if they don't, they'll bring you back some splinters and some delirium rewards.
So what's like the most sketch, like juiced up map that they can run here if you get the best of the best?
I mean, the same as the player, right? A fully a prop corrupted T17 with whatever else is bloody on it. I mean, or 16. Right. I mean, they'll probably they might get. Sometimes you actually. Like it's not mistake proof. You can put it in, and it can be like they have a 1% chance of 1% of the map will be cleared.
Good luck, guys.
And you put it in, and you see the timer count down like 2 seconds, and then they fail, and you're like, oh, they just died.
Portals gone in 2 seconds.
They just died to the first monster.
Damn, that's almost as bad as me.
So yeah, you don't want to do that. But I mean, you technically can. You can just send them to die. Now they don't. In that case, they don't actually permanently die. That can happen. And you actually can lose the worker.
Oh, wow.
There is a sync on that, so you are constantly trying to find more, but it doesn't happen that often. Excellent. And again, it is mostly avoidable by playing a little bit more safe instead of just sending them to their demise all the time.
This whole thing blows my mind. I just love the idea that we can just have like a bunch of plebs now to farm our fragments for it, so we can focus on bossing, like kings, while they do the peasant work in fields. Crazy. How did you like resist the temptation to not go super hard on this and like let us gear them and make parties and change their loot filters?
Well,
and builds?
like early on, there was all sorts of stuff like that we were talking about. Like there was like we were going like full mercenary system with all sorts of stuff for a while, but it was too much and it was too complicated. So we decided not to in the end. But like the whole auto running maps thing was certainly something we were very keen on very early in the league.
So this massive expansion. Yeah. This is actually the downscoped version.
I'm getting that sense.
We certainly had mercenaries as in the first concept, and it was like you can send your mercenaries either on the ships or to the maps, and you can gear them up, and you can give them skills, and they have specializations. It's like
it was just too much though. Like it was too much management, too much like not good.
So different, so much going on.
Different league's problem now.
But yeah, that does kind of sound like another league that I want, though. I'm not gonna lie. I like this auto exile thing.
Right.
Exile team manager, kind of like a sports manager game.
Yeah.
Awesome. Maybe for the future.
Maybe.
All right. So yeah, that features list, like that video just kept going. Like you guys also showed rune smithing, which is like a new take on bench crafting, but as enchantments. These rune words, are they all known recipes, or is there some like discovery process there?
So you start with a few available. So there are different runes, different names. So there's like a sun rune, life rune, power rune. There's all these different names, and you start, I believe. You start with all the ones that require only sun runes, and then once you get a life rune, you can take it to Danig, and he's like, "Oh, now I can learn all of the things that require life rune."
Oh,
and then
he's
so
doing
on.
the hard work.
So I mean,
nice.
The Kalgurans are the ones who know how to do it. You're just bringing them the resources for it. So you eventually work your way up to the very most powerful ones, and you get things like what you saw there. There was the Fire Mjolnir, which you can put on one hand or two hand axe. What we've done is with a lot of the basic outcomes, you can apply that to any weapon, but with a lot of the very specialized ones, you can only apply it to one type of class. So the idea there isn't that like every build is just now doing the Doomfletch Prism on any weapon, the one that we saw on the live stream. It's like, no, that specifically goes on two-handed maces. And then I think the Fire Mjolnir one that was there goes on, I think it's one-handed axes. And, each thing goes on specifically one weapon. And what it allows you to do is so we've taken like an interesting bow unique mechanic, and now you can put it on like some dagger or something like that.
New builds, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they get pretty powerful as far as like, I think there's one that is like 100 you can 100% reduce duration of like soul gain prevention for socketed gems on daggers, and like there's reckon every 20 seconds or something you get haunted by a different torment spirit, and I think there's like a rotating shrine buff one, so it's like every X seconds you're getting a new shrine buff on you, and not a lesser shrine, by the way, and sometimes including divine shrine as well. So you can just be like, I'm just going to sit here until I'm immortal, and then I'll do the boss.
17 mapping strategy.
But those all require the highest tier rune, which we expect to be very, very expensive.
Holy shit.
So
yeah,
are these something that you can trade, the runes, between players?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah. Yes, they all come, primarily all come from shipping, which you can do pretty early in the game, but I suspect late game. And then they are considered a like additional bonus from shipping, where it's like, if you trade to the Kalgurans, they'll send you that back, and the more you send them, the more runes they'll send you, because they're like, thanks for doing business with us.
Yeah, do you know what they're sending you back when you send them a shipment, or is it kind of just like...
No, we've intentionally been quite vague with that, just so people can figure it out. Now, it isn't... There's some determinism, and then some that's just influenced. So, like, I can say, for example, generally crops are giving you back currency, and there's some general influence, but we want people to figure that out and experiment and make up their mind as to what they think is the best combinations to send
certain
to different
locations,
ports.
certain resources are going to give certain rewards back that players can learn.
And there are bonuses on the port, so like you I think in the numbers there it's set 100. So at any given time, it's like they'll pay double for wheat, or I'll pay, and then once you fill that order,
cool.
So after you've sent 10,000 wheat, they might be like, all right, now we're going to pay triple for the next 500 verisium you send us, and stuff like that. So you are changing your shipments to different ports based on those bonuses. And then, like, for example, the item for disenchanting, just a random slight pivot here, but the item you get from disenchanting, the thaumaturgic dust, that is a multiplier on your shipment value. So whatever you send, you then send dust. So if you send some amount of dust, it'll just double your shipment value. And so that one, so it's almost like a meta reward mechanic in that regard.
And that's from grinding up your gear in the gear grinder thing. That's from, also another feature that was in there.
Mm-hmm. And yep, you get a lot more dust for destroy. So just to add some value to some 1 Chaos T0 uniques, disenchant them, because they will give you the most. They will give you the most.
So
dust.
rarity is the key there. So
generally it's like better items give you more. So 6 mods, higher 10 modifiers, and then rarity higher.
You guys like adding sneaky new item sinks, don't you? Like that, yeah. Trying to get those 1C items to 2C.
For sure.
I mean, it just it turns garbage items into good items is the idea, or into more
dust.
tickets at good items. Well, but the point being, the dust is the ticket at better items, you know? Yeah.
Gotcha. Awesome. So another thing, rig combination returns from Sentinel. It was mentioned that it's not going to be as strong as it was. It was obviously one of the strongest crafting mechanics we had outside of maybe Necropolis and that. In what ways is it weaker now?
There's 2 things that have mostly changed about it. One is, and not that I can even specifically remember exactly how it all worked, but there was all this like chance to mutate stuff that was going on with it. That's all gone. It combines the items, and that's what it does.
The items together. So is there like the unique extra mechanic, like modifiers that can randomly appear? Is that gone?
No, those are gone.
All right.
And so it is just merged 2 items together. The other thing that I like about doing it this way, as opposed to having it gated behind a currency item, is that you can actually engage with it earlier in the game. Now, I know that's going to be pretty unorthodox for most existing players, but it's still something you can choose to now engage with, because the gold cost is based on the item level of the item input, and so you can have it be very, very cheap early and more expensive later. And so it just opens it up to more players, instead of just being this thing that you're only ever going to use on the best of the best of the best.
Fun, yeah, that's good. I like that scalability, that you can use it early.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Or even like early maps, it's not going to feel super punishing, and like you can do things like that if you want to, of course.
Well, it's a good mechanic for that, but something that wasn't really accessible.
Yes, correct. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, and I know Sentinel was added. They don't drop recombinators now because it's done through this mean. So
Yeah.
despite Sentinel
They're
being
just
there,
a thing that you can randomly find in maps to get more loot. And have
just
a
more
spicier
juicing. Yep.
gameplay. Yeah, and you've done a bit of that too. So in addition to the new campaign stuff, making the campaign more interesting just with this random little encounters, you've got more stuff just appearing in maps as well. So Wildwood and Sentinel as well.
Yep. Why not?
Yeah, why not, eh?
More juice.
Love it.
It's fun. I like the idea of just the random encounters. Like, they're not on the Atlas tree right now. That doesn't mean they never will be. But I like the fact that there's a handful of things that are just randomly spawning, and so you're doing your rotation, and that throws a little bit of a spanner in the works, and only in a positive element, right? It's not like it takes
especially
anything
for
away.
things like that that are effectively just, this will give you more loot and currency and stuff. So like Wildwood and Sentinel, they're just about like giving you a big boost to your magic find. So you might not necessarily want those to be something that players can have active all of the time, but rather as like a cool bonus that randomly appears to make your map spicy.
That is the other benefit, because it is random and not something that you can just have guaranteed.
It's not
they
warping
can
your play.
they can be stronger.
Yeah.
They can be more
Oh, yeah, true.
impactful as a result. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise,
I really like
they
what
have
I'm
to
hearing.
match the exact power of every other league on or thing you can invest onto the Atlas tree.
Cool. So there was the mention of those like 3 bosses that can disrupt your shipping and all that sort of stuff. When they take something hostage, is just talking about like this gameplay. What is that gameplay like? Are you going into like random fights, or is it always a boss fight that you're going into when you?
It's always a boss fight.
Yep.
Your Atlas runners will always be
That's what I was
taken
wondering.
by the Bandit Lord. Your shipment will always be commandeered by the Admiral, whatever his name is, I forgot. Internal name by Pirate Boss. They get named and I don't remember them all the time. And then the one you find in the world is always the same one as well. And then the you pretty much just go, it'll notify you, and then you go back to the town, to King's March, and the NPC will just be like, here's a portal, go there, kill this person, or don't. If you don't want to. Like, if you feel like you're going to fail, you shouldn't go and do it, right? And you can bring your party members, but you can only enter it once. Like, once you die, you cannot re-enter. So, one shot only.
Okay, let's take a little bit of a turn now, looking backwards at Necropolis and reflecting on some of the changes that happened in it. First, the overall endgame overhaul, such as the removal of sextants and the massive Scarab rework. How do you just feel about that overall, both of you first? How that went, the endgame overhaul?
I do think overall good, but it's very easy for that to get, looked at from a perspective of a few things that are bad and then looking at it badly. Like, there are certainly some things that were imperfect, and we are making some measures to change that. But I do think overall the shakeup was pretty healthy. And when I talk about the bad things, I'm talking like the T17 maps being too hard, right? Yep. And that kind of it overshadows a lot of what's good about it, because there's these few things that aren't right. And then I'm also talking like, okay, we removed Wandering Path, great, and then we added Back to Basics, which is also gone now, by the way, just to clarify, which wasn't mentioned there.
Sure,
like, Back to Basics was even more unhealthy than Wandering Path, or equally
Definitely
unhealthy, depending. But both of them not good, not achieving the philosophy we want. So we didn't, because of that, and because Back to Basics became the meta, it ended up like not even evolving that much. And so I'm hoping with this now set of changes, but all of that ultimately comes about with, because what's going to happen is when you are releasing content on this scale, and I am certainly a risk taker, I like to push the boundaries and all that, you are going to have these things happen. It is borderline impossible for us to test everything, and that's where you see a lot of the reactionary patches that we did early in the league to try and fix and improve everything.
That definitely was something that was really hard, just for the team as well, and like it's also very hard just decision making about, is this something that should be fixed or is it not? Like it was pretty rough at the start there, and I think that is something we're trying to improve this time around by looking more at the extremes and like really zeroing in. So there's definitely a mandate to QA now of like, okay, we need to really work out like what is the actual maximum possible thing for this, and like, like what is the difficulty of what that results in, like is it okay, like is the difficulty versus reward correct for what the players can do here, this kind of thing. And it's something obviously that we should have been like thinking more about before, and like it's something that we're really making sure this time we'll try and do better. But it's tough because like even thinking about what the most extreme case is can be really hard. Like so many things took us by surprise in terms of like particular combinations of things. Like there's so many just ways to combine stuff, and like from so much content from the past as well, that like it's like it's hard to find. Like the fact that there were people finding new ways to abuse stuff even weeks after the it came out just sort of shows you that like there's just it was kind of nuts.
Yeah, you guys asked me an interesting question yesterday when I first came in. It was like, how does 150 uniques from a single boss sound to you? I'm like, what the? That sounds crazy. What are you talking about?
So I guess we'll talk about some of the things that were happening that people weren't aware of. So there was a Reddit thread, and so I can't remember how far into the league, that was pretty much like, what the heck has happened to the prices of T0 uniques?
Yeah.
And you had like Defiance of Destiny at like 4C. It was like actual craziness. And upon looking at this, and oh no, none of this was anyone abusing or exploiting anything.
Not a bug or anything, yeah.
In fact, I think, did we tell you the value of how many unique items were dropping in some of these?
I told him.
I was going to ask you to guess, but we were getting over 100,000 unique items in some instances, and I'm not even talking in a map, in a single map, and I'm not talking I'm not talking a 6-man group. I'm talking solo players who are able to achieve this.
That's insane.
And this is where a lot of those things, so for example, the Shaper Touched rarity, there were just so many layers of multipliers that if used correctly altogether, but you ended up with less than 100 people on the entire realm acquiring over 99% of all T0 uniques. And so we have gone and looked at all that and been like, okay, with this, that is highly compromising the economy and the integrity of the economy, and we fixed some of this last league, but we are doing more of it this time to make sure that your average and above average player isn't like having the economy ruined as their experience, but we're just really, really controlling that like high top end. And I'm talking like most people would never have known this was happening. They would have just been like, where are all these uniques coming from?
It's not a bug. It's just the math of
it's just
rarity
exactly.
and quantity.
There's technically legal stuff, and like there's always a question with stuff like that, because generally speaking, we have the policy of no mid-act nerfs, and yet there were certain cases, and that was really tough the last league, just because we did do some changes to certain mechanics, which we wouldn't normally do because it was just so ridiculous. Like there was stuff going on there that just was not okay.
I saw a screenshot of like one of the monsters that would be part of this, and it was like, it had a list of modifiers that was the entire screen, right?
Right.
We were talking yesterday about whether or not we need a way to collapse the display of the number of essences underneath something's life bar, and it's like, where are we at? Which, by the way, it's still there, so it's like a thing that you can still do. But yeah, it's and I'm not talking like we're getting rid of all the uniques. Like that's what I'm saying. I'm asking you, is 150 all right? And you're like, that sounds excessive. And I'm like, well, it's like several hundred times less than what it was, but it's still top off screen, bottom off screen of unique items just everywhere. And that's just like a single monster. You get the whole res in the area. So we want it to be extreme. Like, don't get me wrong, but it shouldn't be that the entire economy is ruined by 100 people who aren't, or a few people even, who aren't even abusing anything or exploiting anything or doing anything illegitimate. Like, and the problem is, that's where we got into that state where it was like, all right, do we have to nerf X, A, B, C, and D as we kind of discovering and figuring out these strategies? And it's like, let alone the fact that this stuff absolutely rams the performance of the instances, right? Like, I don't know if people saw it when those meat sacks were dying and you'd get like 6-second lag spikes while it's generating the unique items. And so anyway, a lot of it's much more controlled now. We've actually assessed exactly where all that was coming from. We've taken a lot of caution to not nerf the average above average even further than that.
A normal player should not see any change.
Yeah. I mean, and I loved how gloves off it's feeling with your ridiculous changes to the end game here. Like, it feels like you've really opened up over this past couple of leagues to
100%
change stuff pretty wildly.
Again, I go back to that. Go back to that philosophy of like, if we can do stuff to make things better, we do it. And it's just the unfortunate reality is that And I'm ultimately the one pushing most people to do this for PoE1, and the unfortunate reality is it comes with risks, and as a result, failures, of which are 100% on me, like without question. And that's why, again, like straight after the patches, it's like full hands on deck trying to make sure everything is as good as possible. And then we get into a little bit of that difficulty of thinking some people want the game to stay as it is, regardless of the state, and a lot of people want it to keep changing. And we get into this kind of like, which side of this fence do we fall on? And we have to really evaluate each change and do it. But look, ideally, the changes wouldn't be necessary. But when you're changing this much, doing patches this massive, this quickly,
Just a quick comment. So a lot of people felt like it was bad that it's because it reinforces the thing of exploit early and exploit often. Because if you don't, then your experience of the league will be infinitely worse than if you had gotten all that currency, because now everything is just because they changed it. It doesn't mean the economy goes back to how it should be. It goes back to, well, all these people now have thousands of divs or whatever, and then everyone who didn't do that only has single, maybe low double digit divs. Everyone who did do it now has thousands, and the economy is based off of what's in the market. It's not based on what should be happening after effects. It's based on what's already there. So when you nerf something across the board in the middle of a thing, you make it so that you are actively rewarding the people who exploited, because now they've got all the currency, they control the economy, and all the people who didn't are now permanently screwed over. That is one rough thing, because they know that the people, like, yes, it was their fault. They did make this thing. Like, obviously, they didn't intentionally make it super rewarding. They thought they made it appropriately rewarding for the challenge, but after making it like this, everything is in the market, and now they have to pick between fixing it to prevent the game state from getting absolutely worse, or leaving it be and risk the game market absolutely collapsing even worse. But it's still bad when the casual people, the people who aren't doing these hardcore farming strats, are just absolutely destroyed, because they can, no matter what they do from now on, they can't go back and do a thing that's fixed. But all the people who have done it now have all the currency. So in the end, people no longer able to generate the currency as well, and they just fall behind, and they just end up quitting. I mean, during Affliction, they had the thing. They had the super projectile abyssal spire strat. That was the strat. And that was never nerfed. It was only nerfed in private leagues, with the additional projectile thing being taken away. But overall, it was never nerfed at all, and people had the ability to go and be like, I'm gonna go do that. It's the strat this league. Unfortunately, it's the case, but do this, otherwise are just neutering ourselves. But if you take everything away as they come up, then the only people you are actually punishing are not the people who are doing it, but the people who aren't doing it, because they're no longer effectively in the economy. Just a little small rant, I guess, I wanted to say about that topic.
Got like some specific reward modifiers you want, but there's this one bad thing you're gonna have to deal with, and then you actually do commit to dealing with it. It again hopefully adds more ebbs and flows to the process, as opposed to it again just being like out go and run, and that can be quite where some people like that, and that's okay. You can still obviously do that with 16s. I do like these things having an impact on your build, just not to either one, it should be avoidable, and or not to the extent it was before. And again, investing into them, rolling them, like it's certainly not something I'd want to stray away from. I actually consider it a success when you have to re-roll your maps. Again, probably a controversial take, but I think it is a much better thing getting an actual, like it feels more like an actual game mechanic as opposed to like, well, at the point it's just alch and go, and alchs are worth so little. Why you just drop them rare, and like why are you even engaging with the currency on maps system?
Why have mods if the mods don't matter?
Do you take like some consideration to how many chaos, for example, you expect someone to put into a map to produce mods that are on average viable for their build that they're doing?
We do, yes. So I mean, not in the context of a build here, but like for example, we were like, okay, if we want to make T17s able to be easier, like should we reduce it back to 4 to 6 modifiers?
Yep.
But then you just the argument, the reason why we never did that just this league is because, well, now it's even more chaos you have to invest to get 6 modifiers, because the right answer is probably to run 6 modifiers because it gives the best rewards. And so it's like, well, that's just going to massively increase the amount of chaos orbiting someone has to do on those maps. So let's not do it that way. Let's find a different way to do it.
Why not just
So we're
remove
definitely
the
considering
absolutely
how many
horrible
you're having
ones?
to. From a like hyper build specific, it's like if I'm playing this exact specific build, how many chaos on average do I need to avoid it? No, not like hyper specific, but in terms of like broad mechanics, we do generally try and consider that.
Yeah, I imagine you'd be taking like a range of builds and saying, oh, on average, it's going to take about 10, 20 rerolls to produce a map you want to run on this character.
But my hope is that some people at least look at it and go, okay, if I just change this one thing, then I can still run it. So it's not always just like, I know this is probably the preferred strategy. In fact, I'll do it myself probably most of the time. You just avoid anything that's going to cause any friction to your character. But like, there are probably a good chunk of players who are just like, I will deal with this bit of friction by either slowing down a little bit or changing something or subbing something out, or it's good for those players to be able to do that, because then technically they're having to invest less currency. Whether or not it's worth the payoff, it's up to them really to decide that. But
you want the mods to matter, and I get that. And these certainly do matter, but how do you feel about it versus modifiers that do things like, say, this modifier adds these certain sorts of packs of monsters to the map that are very difficult, but also increasing the reward and making the map more interesting by making it more different? As your energy shield is turned off.
The problem you have with things that are implicitly adding direct rewards beyond certain other things is obviously the issue of the fact that you now feel like you have to roll for them. And you saw
like
this with the
Shaper is a maze.
And with the Shaper Touch modifier earlier this league before it was changed, all of a sudden and now all of a sudden you're spending more currency on the maps than you were avoiding the builds, because now you are not only having to get a specific rewarding outcome, you're having to dodge the build things as well. And so it was even more. And as we've removed some mods this league, like I know the barrels was one of them where people were going for the barrels, and it's a couple we've removed a few of those, like, sink currency into this. I would actually expect the amount of chaos you're sinking into these is less this league because we've removed those. But we have kept some, but like we've also then made them rarer, so you're like less likely. But then which I know you could say is counterintuitive to investing currency, because now you have to invest more if you have to get them. But there is a point beyond where you're now no longer expecting to get it, and thus you are just like okay getting it as a surprise, as opposed to when it's kind of within reach, you will just sink currency until it's there. But I actually do like the fact that, like, I liked the days back when you would roll for a lot of the maze and then you'd exalt the maps and stuff like that. That stuff was I found that quite enjoyable.
It was kind of like the game is a bit different than how it used to be, but
for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not obviously going in that path anymore.
Please tell me they removed the action speed
there's still
one.
a little bit of it there. The mods still matter. Reward mods can be bad, but it's good to also have them. There's like a little bit of friction there, which is hard to get perfectly right. And then in the same sense, yeah, I mean, some of them are probably... There are some other small balance changes around T17s, like those bloody Revenant packs are like out of control. You all of a sudden the corpses exploding that you can't even see. Like we did all of this like telegraphing improvements to detonate dead, and then like missed revenants.
Good stuff. Yeah.
So all of a sudden now you're just dead to this invisible corpse explosion, and like
Classic.
there's a few other fine-tuned balance around some of the T17 stuff to make it feel less terrible. And I think it's pretty good. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I'm hoping that it's going to feel a lot better.
Should tier 17s be one of the most profitable things to farm?
I think yes. I mean, what is the argument for no?
I've just
You know,
seen
like,
discussion.
I don't mean
on
from
that
you, I just
topic
mean in general.
Yeah, like some people are, concerned about whether that's the thing that should be happening or not.
Well, should T16s before that? And you could argue, well, okay, T17s you have to trade for. And that's the real difference, is that if you want to run them permanently, you have to trade for them. But generally the economy sorts itself out there to some degree. It's just that it adds that extra layer of annoyance.
Yeah.
But then also if T17s were self-sustaining, then it was kind of like what differentiates them from 16s at that point. It's just back to what you were doing with 16s, except they're now purple with harder modifiers, and you could argue that's better or worse, except I really like the idea of that, when you are just generally playing and not engaging with, the trade to that level, you're doing 16s with the occasional popping into 17s here and there. I do think that is generally better, but I can see why it can be annoying for someone who's like, I have to trade for these because I don't want to run anything but them. But that kind of can always be argued to be the case for almost everything. I
mean, in some ways, T17s are like are the map scarcity that the map system used to have long ago at lower levels. It's like you've got this one tier that kind of has that sort of like you're not expected to necessarily, like if you're just playing without trade, to be able to just run it again and again for T17 specifically, and that's kind of also comes down to that same thing with the mods. It's like the reason you're caring about re-rolling and so on for T17s is because of the fact that you don't necessarily they're not just growing on trees. That's why you've got a bit of a different philosophy there with the mods that they have on as well.
I know this stuff is like pretty it's going to be pretty polarizing between people as to what's right there, but like it is very important to us that the ebbs and flows remain, and you don't just end up with this flat boring grind at the very top end like that. Like it should be evoking difficulty, and it shouldn't just feel completely just it again, it gets further away from a game and more towards just a kind of AFKable and I don't mean actually AFKable, but something where you're not really investing much emotion into and thought into, and it doesn't feel like you're playing at that point. It just feels like you're just going along with it. So I think it's very important to have the different spikes and things come and go, and to have friction and all of those things. And I think without any of that, you'd find stuff would get very boring very quickly.
Just very quickly, how do you feel about the betrayal changes, like the change to the Veiled Chaos and the simplification of it as well? It feels like now it's mostly people just kind of spamming Katarina with maybe some consideration to getting some like div card stacks or something like that, but you're not really doing as much of the engaging with the board now, I think.
Betrayal is in a very bad state, for sure. I am not happy with it. It was on the list of 325's thing. I know, despite the fact we have so much, there was more. We didn't get round to doing it. It's currently slated for 326. I'm very much hoping we can do it then. The main thing I want to divorce is... so I actually just want there to be... there is one safe house, and that... and so all four connect to one thing. Sorry, how do I explain this? It's like, effectively, Katarina isn't tied to the safe house. Like, you can do your safe house, and that will give you a ticket to Katarina. And so you just have one safe house that has the whole board on it, and you earn intelligence for it, and the people still have their reward association, and then... doing that gives you a itemized version of Katarina you can run separately. But the main thing is you're not linking the board to Katarina's, because there's always been this friction of do I min-max my Katarina outputs, or do I do my interesting board layout? And you're just at the point where it's like screw all that. I just want as much mastermind intelligence as possible.
Yep.
So I'm not going to interact with anything on the board really, except for whatever might min-max that. And so, yeah, I want to divorce those two things so that you don't have that conflict, because we have never been able to get that balance, and I don't even know if that's possible. You're always either going to want to like never run Katarina because it destroys your board state, or you'll always run Katarina because the Veiled Orb. And so I want to, divorce those two things such that one doesn't destroy the other, because it hasn't been right the whole time. So, and I think that will just be a much, much better if we do that. And then Katarina is just there as a thing you can do. You do the boss fight and you can trade for it. You can buy the tickets to it if you want, or and then you can do all the board interaction, separately. You'll still have I want to min-max my safe house running to get tickets to Katarina, but what we can do is have a correlation of the chance of getting it, or the number of the tickets you get to Katarina correlate to the state of the board somehow. But
Sounds nice.
at least you're not going to, I don't ever want it to be like, I'm not going to fight Katarina because I don't want to reset the board. Like, I don't think those two frictions should ever occur. It hasn't been right, honestly, since we released it, to be honest.
All right,
so.
let's let him cook, hey? Let's let him cook. So we should talk just a little bit about Necropolis itself. I know you were pretty excited for the mechanic. I was too, because I love a good, thick crafting league. And it certainly ended up very powerful, but ultimately the crafting mechanic, not that popular, I think, due to the friction of engaging with it, the corpses, managing all of that. But how do you feel about Necropolis in hindsight now?
Yeah, definitely that part is, well, we kind of knew going in that it was more on the complicated side, for sure.
They should have done
some things just kind of, it's not necessarily a problem for something to be a little bit more complicated like that, but it probably went a little bit too far. That being said, it was pretty damn powerful, especially after our changes we made very early into the league. In terms of getting like full T1 modded items, probably went a little bit too far, to be honest. But yeah, that being said, understood it was a bit too computer sciencey, I like to call it, in terms of like lots of figuring out, what to do, and kind of uncertainty to the point where it overwhelmed a lot of people. And that's where you see, I even recombinating and runesmithing coming back way more simple, straightforward. Some things are just very clean cut. Some things are a little bit more complicated, and different users appeal to both. Would I have changed it now knowing that? I mean, I would have had the balance initially go out correct at the start, but I would say there's still a place for things like for it.
The update was certainly very solid for it, making it a lot better.
Simplified a bunch of stuff down with it as well. I'd probably have gone a bit further with the simplification if I'd had to redo it with some of it. Some of those like meta mods and some of the more crazy things are a little bit,
For me, though, it wasn't about so much how much complicated it was, and it was more about the just getting so many corpses, trading for so many corpses, right?
Sure. Yes, fewer, more impactful ones would have been a lot better. Yeah, you ended up getting a lot. That's partly due to the Atlas tree passives, which was a mistake. Straight up, goodbye, they're gone.
Yeah.
If it was to redo,
experiment, done.
100% experiment. They're no longer there. Everyone saw that as an Atlas tree tax.
Yeah.
Yep, it was. You could have
'cause you
argued
had
making
to
them way
do 'em.
weaker would have mitigated that.
But then
Whatever.
why?
The original intention of it was like, okay, we want these keystones because it allows people to change behavior. And I think if we are to see that again, we would have that. We'd have introduce ways for people to change the behavior, but not invest into the increases and more corpses and all of that, because it felt mandatory, and it often will when you have the league in every single area.
The thing they should have done was the Sentinel tree again. Sentinels had their own tree that you could invest in. You didn't waste any more points that would have gone to any other mechanics. You had a Sentinel tree. They shouldn't have done the Atlas passive tree. They should have just done a tree within the thing.
In the league, but still, it was like, I remember Ziz messaged me at one point, and it's just like, oh my god, the amount of quad tabs I need to hold all these corpses, and I'm just like feeling real sad about it. It's not like, that was the intention by any means. So yeah, I didn't quite hit the mark for sure.
Just lessons learned.
Lessons learned for sure. Yeah.
All right, cool. The All Flames had a bit more mixed positive and negative. Like, it was definitely a very cool added layer of map customization, but it was not optional, and that was definitely the concern we had going into it. and it also added just that extra layer of work that you have to do before you can start playing, which PoE has a fair bit of, and
For sure. And again, we again with the league being like, something you do have to generally engage with before doing areas. It's again that kind of X factor that makes a league different and makes it feel different. But at the end of the day, probably was a little bit too much annoyance to have to do this thing every single area. But it's certainly we like to try these things out here and there. Some people probably thoroughly enjoyed engaging with that stuff, of course. And I mean, end of the day, leagues are never going to really be for everyone. They're always going to have some amount of people who aren't really into it. But look, we tried something new. We always do like to try something new when it comes to these leagues, and a lot of people did enjoy various elements of it. Some of it doesn't hit. That's all right. Like, we don't do it again, right? Like, that's part of it. And this is a lesson learned every single league, right? There are always elements of leagues that don't work. There are elements we learn from. There are elements we don't repeat. And then we take what we can do is take the stuff that is good, that is fun, and find a way to integrate it into the game later.
Company to
and
be
now
able
the
to
core
fully
game
test
experience
with
is
a
overall
wide
better
range
as a result of us, like, learning from all
reactions
the
to
stuff.
things.
Keep the experiments going. Keep going wild with it. We're going to go rapid fire now so people can get their 30,000 patch notes, their record-setting patch notes very soon here. So we had finally the much-awaited massive melee change. What was the big thing that led to you guys pulling the trigger on this issue?
I mean,
doing some melee stuff.
Ultimately, the community. People wanted it.
What was like the key change that you kind of needed, maybe to get figured out?
The one that I remember us walking through was there was kind of we made a document of like, okay, what are the things that a melee build currently mandatorily needs to know to do in order to be viable, and effectively we had all these multipliers, and if you didn't know to do them, then you just sucked.
It's bad. Yeah.
And so effectively we needed to do something about that to make it so that just hit things is like a more viable path. I think that's just really looking at that, and so that hence why you have the removal of melee totems and so on. Honestly, even I was kind of shocked that Mark was like, let's just straight up remove them. I know we talked for a little bit about like maybe there's some way to make it so that like
I joked about it,
the builds,
but I was also
the
like,
yeah, they
have to.
It was just like, you know what, we'll go clean slate, and we'll try to make sure let's just get rid of any of these barriers. And
there's a buff that does.
I just want you to hit things with your weapon, or hit monsters or the ground with your weapon, and things die, and you're not having don't get me wrong. I want there to be secondary axes of skills that are often skill involved. You do have to use them. I don't just want it to be that you have 1 6-link and every single other gem slot is empty. Like, it should be that there are these other axes, but I also want you to be able to choose whether or not which ones you use, which ones you invest into the tree. Whereas a lot of what was happening before is, something is often either too powerful that you feel like you have to use it, and all of a sudden now every single build is using this exact same thing, and every single build feels so similar. Whereas really the way that should ideally work is something is much weaker initially, and you have to invest into the passive tree and stuff like that to make it good enough. But it means that different characters will have different secondary specializations, and you'll find a lot of these, like something like tinctures, something like retaliation skills, they're going to be quite polarizing. People are going to love them or hate them, and that's okay. That's good. And it means that you get these differences in builds where you are actually speccing into and using these secondary things. But the one other main thing is I really want it to be less unique item-driven mandatory things, right? I don't want uniques to suck, don't get me wrong. I just want it to be that it's like, in order to do X, Y, and Z, I must be using this, and now I'm considered viable by the game's standards,
like build checklist thing that we...
Yeah, it's gone a little bit too far. And so we're bringing a lot of these mechanics to the forefront on the passive tree, because that is one way place. And of course, by having more... Like, considering when you got this league, you're going to have runesmithing. You've got the obviously quality changes applies to unique. You've got the new modifiers on rare items. You've got we haven't buffed the life on every unique. We've buffed it on Kelms. That's it, right? So all uniques proportionally just got worse to rare items, quite intentionally, so that rare item, and it's not it's not just hiding behind all these things you got to learn and wiki and do all of that. So it should be that you can get further without having to have extreme specialized knowledge, especially with melee this time round. And on top of that, like bringing a lot of these hidden mechanics that were like hard to figure out way more to the foreground, so they're just more obvious and you can figure them out. And also just, yes, hit things and they die, and not feel so like, okay, I'm hitting things and they're not dying, but now I do this thing and combine this and this and this and this and this, and now things get hit and die. But that is still there, and that will allow you to go even further and even more efficiently, and thus get more items and more power, of course, right? We're not dumbing things down. The intention is just to make it that, like, if you aren't doing all of these things, you're not just absolute garbage, you know?
Well, playing devil's advocate a little bit, the new banners, is that kind of just melee totems again?
I mean, not in this... Okay, they're not as powerful implicitly. They are... It depends on what you want to call it. You can look at the totems from a perspective of, yes, the busy work side of things, of I'm having to do this thing every so often, sure. But it's also not like, if you don't use them, it's not like you're bad, right? You can get damage from so many places. Only one of the banners is giving damage. It's giving a lot less damage. In order to make banners really good, you have to spec into a lot of them onto the tree. They are still kind of good. I do expect a lot of melee characters still to be using them. And I do like the idea that there is... skill involved as to thinking, when should I use them?
They're not an always up thing like the totems were, which is the biggest issue with them.
Unless you invest into them, in which case, so one of the passives that was shown is that banner effects linger for X seconds. They automatically pick up when you exit the radius, so you can place them down and then just sprint, and then you get the effects for seconds, and then you can place it again. And sure, yeah, it might end up being like on rotation, it's being used for some builds, and on others they're being way more tactical with it, doing it during a breach and during this, but on regular monster to monster clearing they're not. Kind of want it to be... I feel like you have a lot more agency with banners, and yeah. The other thing, of course, being getting rid of, even like Berserk. We're getting rid of a lot of the extreme high power mandatory things that if you were a player who didn't know about it, all of a sudden you're not, considered viable. And the one other thing we've done there, I know we said rapid fire, but it is don't worry, it's part of the question.
People can wait.
We've made sure to we've got spreadsheets out the wazoo of like experience per hour testing. We've got like, time testing. We've got like our one of the people probably see him takes ages, always on the ladder, freaking winning things here and there. He has been sitting there running, literally doing races, technically with every single class, for the last 3 months, probably straight. Every single waking minute, he is playing a different character, writing down times to kill Brutus, time to kill this, time to get to this, time to do this, XP per hours everywhere, what variables make the most difference. And we've taken all of that data and gone and been like, all right, these are the outliers on the bottom, these are the outliers on the top. Let's like find out where the thing should sit. And generally, it's now meant to be, if you are a character with a melee character, and let's say you've got 70th percentile gear, and there's a caster next to you that has 70th percentile gear, if you can maintain, a melee character is generally meant to be stronger and more efficient at that point, of course, but it is easier to take damage and harder to maintain damage uptime as a result. So if you can overcome those two axes, a melee character with equivalent gear should be better than any other character.
In a better player's hands.
Yes, and then a better player can obviously seize that even better and take that even further.
That's fascinating. Wow. So we've got like new item bases going into much higher level maps and stuff like that as well. What kind of led to that change there? Just making rares matter again?
Making rares matter again is one thing, but also it's, again, adding that very obvious way to keep getting upgrades throughout endgame. Honestly, given how long endgame takes and how much of an integral part of it is, like the amount of base types introduced there, like sure we had steel rings and two-tone boots, but they didn't really make a huge difference. So we're just adding more here. It is more clear, like if you are struggling in yellow maps, you have something you can try and get now to make that easier for yourself. If you're struggling in red maps, you have these obvious things that are like, this will be an upgrade for me. Let me actually try and do it. Obviously just on the defensive axis for now, so you can maybe focus a little bit more of your passives into damage, along with all the new defensive tools. But yes, primarily it is like, a more obvious, here's a way that you can upgrade your character. And of course, for high-end players, it's a new thing to strive for to push their character further than ever before. I wouldn't say this specific direct goal is like get rid of unique items. That is just a happy side effect of, rare items mattering more once again.
All right. We'll wrap up pretty much there. We've got lots of new leagues coming back this time. Is there any other ones you're looking forward to? I know people have been asking about the Trial of the Ancients as well, whether that sort of stuff's coming back.
Trial of the Ancestors, probably not. Maybe for I don't know. You never know with these things. If you had asked me Sentinel, I would have said no.
Yeah.
And now it is. So you never know with these things, honestly. I'd say there's no current plans, but
Okay.
Who knows? Things change every week around here.
Guys, this was a massive Q&A. I'm exhausted. It's awesome. Let's go take a break and let people read some patch notes. And there'll be an FAQ news post wrapping up some of the questions from this, but also ones that we didn't get a chance to get around to. So you guys will be able to answer some of them there and read some of those later. But thanks so much, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck to everyone reading those patch notes.
Yeah, good luck.
It'll take a while.
Yeah.
We considered doing audiobook versions of them in the past, but I'm not going to be sitting there. I would have to be reading it.
Pick your favorite streamer.
I will be
to drink lots of water.
uploading this to YouTube,
folks.
but I'll be
that's it for now.
separating
Thanks for
the
watching, folks. See you later.
Thank you.
live and the patch notes into different videos, so it's not just one big, massive 5-hour video.